Each year, the students choose a faculty member to speak at graduation. This year, the students chose Professor Trish Hurley. Professor Hurley is a terrific, truly beloved teacher and so very deserving of this honor. Professor Hurley has taught legal research and writing and written oral advocacy at Berkeley since 1999. Prior to arriving at Berkeley Law, she served as a staff attorney for the Ninth Circuit, where she worked on civil and criminal appeals and motions pending appeals. In 2013, Professor Hurley received Berkeley Law's Rudder Award for Teaching Distinction, the highest award the law school gives for excellence in teaching. She is a Herman Hill K lecturer in residence. Her teaching evaluations are always superb, with students praising her effectiveness in teaching legal writing, her rigor, and most of all, her compassion and kindness. Please join me in welcoming Professor Trish Hurley.
Thank you, Dean Chemerinsky. Congratulations, class of 2023. It is a huge honor and a great joy to be with you here today. All of us on this stage are so very proud of you and all you have accomplished. You have worked so hard to get here, to this moment, this morning, when you will receive your law degrees. And you know what? We know how hard you have worked because, well, we're the ones who assigned all that work to you. The papers, the midterms, the finals, more papers, and of course, those interactive Blue Book exercises. You're welcome. One reason I was surprised that the graduating class chose me to speak here today is that this is the only class of graduates who I never met in real life while teaching them because classes were entirely on Zoom. When I finally met my students from Mod 2, during your second year of law school, it was such a treat to lay eyes on you. I was surprised by your height. I imagine many of you were surprised that I look about 10 years older without that Zoom filter that I had set to the highest level possible. I really do miss that filter. But that's the only thing I miss about teaching on Zoom. The rest of it was as much of a challenge for me as it was for all of you. Now, my legal writing colleagues and I teach you to avoid the passive voice unless you have a good reason to employ it, such as to hide the actor. So I will use it here about my Zoom teaching with great intentionality. Mistakes were made. There was the time I tried to show my students the viral cat video. I'm sure many of you have seen it. A lawyer's child had put a cat filter on his screen and he did not know how to remove it. So he went ahead and tried to appear for a motion in a court with the cat filter on. Through a fluffy cat face and darting eyes, the lawyer pleaded with the judge, "Your Honor, I assure you I'm ready to proceed, and I'm not a cat." So I thought it would be fun to show it to my students right when it came out, but I was nervous about sharing a video on Zoom, so I practiced ahead of time. When I showed the video to kick off a class, it seemed to go over so well. I was laughing, I could see my students were laughing. Such a fun, lighthearted moment. Afterwards, one of my students said, Professor Hurley, we actually couldn't hear any of the audio. We were all laughing at you laughing at the video. Yes. Then there was the time I broke my students into smaller groups and sent them to those breakout rooms for a few minutes to discuss a case. When I went to bring all the students back together, I saw that the Zoom control panel had completely disappeared from the bottom of my screen. I couldn't retrieve my students from the breakout rooms, and I couldn't let them know that I couldn't retrieve them from the breakout rooms. I felt a rising wave of panic, as though my students existed only in the ether of Zoom. and that if I couldn't somehow beam them back up to my Zoom room, they would be lost in space forever. What a relief it was to find that my students were in fact corporeal and resilient beings who could survive and even thrive despite some online mishaps. It was such a humbling year. It was a year of loneliness and longing for connection. It was so hard for all of you just starting law school that you could not just casually meet each other in the classroom or at a lunch talk or in the hallway. But you did manage to connect, and you did learn, both in your doctrinal classes as well as our skills class. When we shifted to written and oral advocacy in the spring, the JD students were assigned to argue on one side or the other of a raging debate that literally split the 1L class in two. Did the artist Carmen Madura transform Lawson Neal's copyrighted origami crease patterns? Or not? Okay, look, enough. Your class seems so unified and happy on this lovely day. Best not to get all riled up about which side was right on that contentious fair use issue. But I did bring an origami figure as a memento of that shared first year experience. You may recall, as we learned in our case record, origami can be a symbol of transformation. Whether those origami patterns that you argued about as 1Ls were transformed into modern art or not, we saw each of you transform as you did your first oral arguments on Zoom. You transformed into effective and confident advocates, despite not being at an actual podium or in the same room with the judges. And you have used your impressive advocacy skills to do extraordinary work, even while still in law school. As we have heard from your colleagues and speakers, and as you celebrated last night at the public interest graduation, you've engaged in over 30,000 recorded hours of pro bono work. Yes, remarkable. And 144 of you are earning pro bono honors today. It is, yeah. It is truly remarkable the dedication you have already shown to pro bono and public interest work. And on the precipice of this transition, I'd like to paraphrase an important question posed at the end of a beautiful poem by Mary Oliver. What is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious Berkeley Law degree? Now, some of my former students have taken a more linear path that seems to flow straight from the plans they made in law school. For example, those who became public defenders or prosecutors, those with a tech background who do intellectual property work. Some other graduates I've known have had a more windy path, because this law degree can take you in so many different directions. That can be exciting, but also a bit daunting. So I have 4 brief tips to offer you today as you're starting out. First, I'm signposting. See that? Okay, thank you. First, be open to following a path you may not envision at this moment. I never considered an academic career for a moment when I was in law school. So how did this unfold? I paid attention to what work I found satisfying and what matched my skill set. After graduation, I worked in several different units at the Ninth Circuit as a staff attorney. My favorite days were when we got to present cases to judges, and I especially loved to mentor new attorneys and externs. Reflecting on those aspects of that job at the court helped guide me to this position, which has been enormously satisfying for, more than 2 decades. So periodically, when you're at your job, ask yourself, what part of each job gives you great satisfaction? Is it the area of law itself? Is it direct service or working to change oppressive policies? Is it negotiating contracts for your clients or writing appellate briefs? Seek out those opportunities within your current position. And if you see something outside your current job that fits your values and your skills, consider just taking a step in that direction. Quick story to illustrate. One of my best law school friends was working at a big firm back east when he felt inspired by a gubernatorial candidate. So he cold called the candidate and offered his help. Several years later, my friend left the firm to become the governor's legal counsel and later chief of staff. When the governor had to make an interim appointment to fill the vacant seat of a senator who had become Secretary of State, my friend, his trusted advisor, became a United States Senator. Sure, it was a temporary appointment, but it's a lifetime title. It really is. I still call him Senator. It was an extraordinary experience that flowed from my friend feeling inspired to just reach out to a candidate that he believed in. Second, welcome constructive feedback. It is crucial to be a lifelong learner within your profession. I remember receiving bright red corrections all over my written work as a 3L extern at the Ninth Circuit, but all that feedback made my writing much more clear and concise. Right before I graduated, my supervisor at the Ninth Circuit called to offer me a job, one I had not applied for. Why? He said, and I quote, "We really liked working with you. You never made the same mistake twice." Notice, he did not say, "I never made mistakes, just not the same ones, and not the ones that they had pointed out." Paying attention to feedback strengthens your skills and makes supervisors want to work with you. Third, say yes to working with good people and say yes to opportunities. I am surrounded by great people in this job, talented staff, terrific faculty, and of course, our extraordinary dean. Yes. To be clear, I am not just saying that because they're all sitting right behind me. I am particularly grateful to work with my brilliant and collaborative colleagues in the legal writing faculty. Yes, give it up for legal writing. As many of you know, our beloved colleague, Professor Lucinda Sykes, died suddenly last year before those of you who were so lucky to have her during your whole 1L Zoom year had a chance to even meet her in real life. One of Lucinda Sykes' many wonderful qualities that I encourage you all to emulate: say yes to opportunities, even if you do not feel entirely ready for them. When she was a young public interest lawyer in DC, Lucinda's supervising attorney came to her and said there was a case that had just landed in their office that she should argue at the Supreme Court. Lucinda did not feel ready to make that leap, and yet she said yes. She did a fantastic job, and she was always so grateful she did not pass on that incredible experience. To those graduates from Mod 9 who Professor Sykes guided, yeah, Mod 9, I see you, who Professor Sykes guided with kindness and wisdom throughout your 1L year, she loved graduation and always cheered the loudest when she saw her students crossing the stage. Please know how delighted and how proud Lucinda would be of you today. And finally, stay in touch with supervisors, mentors, and professors, particularly when they tell you to do so, which I am doing right now for all of us. There may be opportunities that we hear of that would be a great fit for you. Or if you're feeling stuck or in need of a boost, we can remind you how smart and talented you all are. Yes, we care about your success and your happiness, and we always love to hear from you. I know I speak for the entire faculty when I tell you, have faith in yourselves and in the education and skills that you have developed here. Do not doubt that you have earned this degree and that you will use it to do good and important work. Oh, one more thing. Whatever path you take, remember to bring the good book with you. Yes, citation, still important out there. Congratulations and best wishes to all of you.